Namaste. In Lakesh Alakim. This is your brother Surrealism, a prism of realism. The question is, are you evolving or devolving? We got a special guest here, Precious Stones, the one and only. She's here to answer the question, are you evolving or devolving? Precious, how are you doing this evening?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
All is evolutionary, all is expanding. Thank you for asking.
All right.
Well, Precious, we have an article here that I came across, and I shared this with you the other day as well. And it was an article from Psychology Today, and it stated in the title, or the heading of the article, Six Signs of a Deteriorating Relationship. People show their true feelings in subtle ways. Now I'm going to read one of the key points, and you give me your opinion and view on this. It says, key point number one, breakups happen gradually, not suddenly. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I agree.
Can you give us a little bit of, can you expand on why you agree?
Um, because they do happen gradually. We start disconnecting from a connection that you had, or you thought you had, or forced to have, because it was something I guess you felt you wanted to experience. And when you start disconnecting and starting to see that you are out of alignment, you're not in alignment with one another, things start unraveling. And your body, tells you and talks to you that this is not something that is going to be a part of your future. So you start basically navigating on how to break away from it. Yeah.
Can I ask you this?
Yes.
Have you always understood that that was the process in the breakup for you to do one or two things? Have you always understood that, or as I like to say, understand? Have you always understand that clearly that that was the process in which was happening?
Yes. Yeah.
Do
Mhm.
you think do you think men struggle with understanding that versus women?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
Would you mind
Mm.
elaborating on that statement?
Well, I guess men, like, have a different, like, perception, and it all depends on, I guess, where uh the man is at, because if he's somewhere where he is, looking at it as surviving, and things are going smooth enough to survive, and she's wanting something more he's not connecting with her on, you know it's going to be a bumpy ride, because he's like, oh, it's all right, let's go for the ride. And then she's like, well, I don't want to go for this ride, because I can see it's not going in the same direction I want to go. So it all depends on the man, his intention, and if he's willing to see what is and has always been.
Well, I
So
was go ahead.
no, go ahead. Hmm.
Well, I agree with you, and I think what I hear you saying also is that there's many layers and levels in which we connect and have relationships based on, like you say, the perception of really both parties. But with me asking the question, with women having a better understanding of what's happening in a relationship, and the man really not fully catching on quick enough. And I will speak for myself in general. I do think that most men from a certain background with certain experiences and certain traumas and dramas they've experienced, we're very late and slow to realize the party, or let alone that there's no no balls on the pool table. Like there really is no game to play at this point. Like it's been done and over. But because of again the traumas and the dramas and the effect that has on one's, I'm gonna say their mental, their emotional, as we also state, their spirit, soul, and then physical. I think there's so much of a delay or a residual effect that can last years, if not decades, if not a whole lifetime, whether it's male or female. What do you think about that?
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
And these subjects, as you know, are very creatively, as I like to say, complex when we don't know enough about enough.
Right.
And that can take a lot of heartache and 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 hard lessons, a lot of heartache and hard lessons to realize that I don't know enough about enough and I need to stop and take a time out. And I think, in my opinion, I think women are a lot better and a lot more keen and aware to do that. And I'm gonna say in their base nature, I'm gonna say majority of women, if not all. I think that's just something in y'all nature because of the effect, constant breakups and challenges in relationships have, and that effect that's left on let's just say that particular woman versus the effect that's left on that particular man. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to hover here for a minute because again that key point, breakups happen gradually, not suddenly, and a lot of us will struggle in the gradual and not see what's happening. And then there's no solution for a lot of us when it comes to either having, as I like to say, some wise elder that's in balance in their inner understanding to go converse with or to get some guidance from. And that could be male or female, as in who needs to search for that help. Usually both parties at some point, because I'm not going to say, he's more wrong than her and vice versa. I think there's a wrong inner and overstanding that could be in general. I think both parties, based on their trauma, drama body, can be not approaching the situation as authentically healthy as it should be.
Yeah.
And that's why for me, I can take a lot of blame from the male side because usually men, majority of the time, don't get me wrong, not to say women don't have their trauma body and can't be off the chain or off the chain gang as well. I just think that when we get past what gender is more worse than which one and get into the consciousness or lack of, I think that sets the tone and the foundation for both parties. And then we start to see that, well, both of us got to show and prove. And it's she may have, if I'm gonna give it a reference just for detailed description, maybe she has, whatever percentage to work on. And he has whatever percentage. And I think it can fluctuate, or totally it could be maybe more him than her. I do think that ultimately it can go to that equation if we're going to have to describe it to break it down. But I think if the foundational elements are there in the beginning, you have a better picture of where this could go or how we're going to handle the challenges and how we're being challenged to grow and to see and to reflect the light from each other. And if we don't carry that light or understand it, then obviously, the breakdown is happening.
Yeah. And it's a responsibility too. And if we're not willing to take on that responsibility, whether it be this person or the next person or at all, certain things are going to happen and certain things are not going to happen. You know what I mean? It can't be. It's a two-way street. It can't be just one, working on evolvement and the other. Well, I'll just watch you, and you can just bring me along. It's not that type of party. You know, we all have responsibility to go within and go without and connect and communicate to really focus on the solution. And if the solution is separation, then that's what needs to happen. And regardless if we, force it or not, the symbols and the signs are going to let you know, and it's just going to not be in alignment.
Well, I agree. And to give more clarity to my words earlier, I think when we personalize the experience and we look back, we're going to see a certain percentage of who was more to blame and who wasn't when we personalize it from what we are experiencing. But if I look at it from more of a universal, holistic standpoint, I realize that it's always will be both parties. There's no way to get around it. It's both
Hmm.
parties. But again, like you say, that has to be enough alignment for both to see that. Because see, if not, one gonna blame more than the other, and she could be more true, or he can think he's more true and really be more wrong. But remember, that's relative to who's experiencing the discourse or the disconnection. So that's why initially my words was, well, I didn't want to finger point and say always he's more to blame than her, because I realized that that can still be an opening for, let's just say, some women to feel like, well, I'm perfect. There's nothing wrong with me, and I've never been the problem, and I can always, and it's always been him or always been the man. And I'm like, well, from my understanding in this journey and evolutionary process, it's always going to be on both of us. But when you personalize it to our personal experiences and we look back historically, of course, you're going to say, well, if I look at these experiences, and true enough, 9 times out of 10, it may have been him more than her based on how we personalize it. But even in personalizing, I still got to be honest and look back at me and say, well, yeah, I could have did this different. I could have did that. I guess what I'm saying is I never want to make it seem like I'm not I don't have anything to work on. I don't want to make it seem like I'm just perfected and I've never did any wrong and have done any wrong. And I think that's why I want to kind of elaborate more of my words and make sure that I give some clear examples of, how it's on both people, as you stated as well, because that sets the tone and the foundation. And without that, we're struggling in the dark to understand a deeper connection in a concept that we keep repeating the same cycles and patterns, and these lessons get more tough and more intense, and the losses get real and they pile up, and then you're stuck with all the trauma within your tissues, and within your mental and your emotional and your spirit, your soul body, your physical body, like, because you take in the essence of another person or a situation, or really everything we come in encounter with. There is a energetic exchange. It's just whether how interpersonal and how intimately woven, that exchange is. Any thoughts to that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Well, most
Yeah.
definite. And one of the other key points here was that breakups are more likely when people feel like their partner is less responsive to good news or self disclosures. What do you think about that?
Um, I agree with that because that's true. You start to lose interest um in the other individuals. You can say growth or evolvement because you feel the void, and the void is like louder than any silence probably could be. So that's you're not concerned about you know um how this person is growing. Your main concern is like, well, how am I gonna end this? How am I gonna get away from this to release this feeling and this to get away from this disconnection? What's not there, the void. So yeah, you know, and not having that support and expressing that kind of energy. I mean, you feel it whether or not you say it or not. You know what I mean? So I guess then it comes to what do you do with that? What say you? How are you gonna move?
Well, you're right. And, these processes, or some say processes, are very they require a lot of inner growth and inner truth and rearranging your lifestyle as holistic as possible to what's most important within the connection of this woman and man, from a general reference. And in saying that, going back to the initial key point, which I'm going to read again for myself, which was breakups are more likely when people feel like their partners is less responsive to good news or self-disclosures. I mean, who would have thought without paying detailed attention that these are the subtle ways that an ending to a relationship is starting to happen when there's not enough support around good news? I mean, who would have thought when you really look at it how this is considered, based on this particular psychologist's breakdown and all of her years of study, one of the top six signs. I mean, as I've read that the other day and have processed it now a few days, I say this is amazing because everything matters in the connection. Everything has a point or value system that is measured within the day, or as we come to learn, plasma. For those of us that are thinking, on another dimension, as well as the week or the heptad or the moon or the month, they add up into the years. And as is commonly referenced, if you make it as far within the decades. And I think one of the main highlights to remember is that the effect and the toll that it takes on you is always present, as we define positive or negative based on how we're processing the experience. And in saying that, again, for me, it's like everything counts and everything adds up at the end of the day. And you got to show and prove with the best of them. And good news and not supporting that shows signs that we got an issue here. So imagine, not being able to communicate that. Or let's just say, if it was a woman asking me and she said, well, I noticed your reaction wasn't as, excited as I thought. Can you tell me why? Or are you not excited for me? Are you not happy? Are you not, and I could say, well, I either got this and that going on. I hear you. It's great. I didn't mean to come off like I didn't care. It's just that right now, maybe I'm a little overwhelmed, or maybe right now, I'm processing some of my own healing at the moment. So my words are coming out maybe not as enthusiastic. Doesn't mean I don't care. It just means I need to reinforce that I do care and definitely follow up as soon as possible, and not let that linger, so that now this particular woman thinks, oh, well, he doesn't really care because I've said this one time, two times, three. And, once you start building up a pattern with sounding not as enthusiastic, even though that man or me may very well be enthusiastic, it's just that, again, the way our lives are set up, sometimes it's not that teenage excitement anymore. It's more of that kind of realistic, like, I'm happy, it's flowing. Okay, but we notice we got to maintain this, or she has to maintain this. There's something next to be done. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah, I do agree. And communication is a vital tool. Yeah.
The article made there was another breakdown here, and it says less supportive reactions to the good news. When something exciting happens, if you share the news with your partner, do they celebrate? That's the question. How do you react when your partners share their good news? Good news reactions may give some insight into the future stability of a relationship. Partners who perceive less constructive reactions to their good news disclosures, less enthusiastic, more destructive, or passive, are likely to break up within a few months compared to those who genuinely and energetically celebrate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's true because part of staying connected and growing and being in alignment is, that support. So if you're not going to support this, and what are you going to support and what are we doing and where are we going? You know, are we going to move together or apart?
In hearing you share that, what do you think? How can I say this? I'm trying to find another way to, I guess, for myself to say it clear. I guess we've all been programmed, you know, and I'm gonna say it humbly speaking, or from my, understanding, we've all been programmed to different levels when it comes to, hanging in there, giving it more time. Let's struggle it out. Let's try. And do you think that's the best approach to take in a new or starting relationship?
um, hmm. No, not if you feel like you are partially forcing something that's not really there.
Now, when you say part, if, I apologize for cutting
Well,
your words off, but when you say partially forcing, you're basically saying that, let's just say, from the from that particular woman's standpoint, she already knows something or several things are missing.
yeah, because there can be a certain connection there. Like maybe you can, talk about some general stuff, and then when it comes to like talking about building and evolution and universal principles and going within, you're really not connecting on a like partnership, let's do this together type level. Like, yeah, I really want to do this with you, and the feeling in my heart, different things going on. It's just that conversation. So if there's something missing, you know what I mean, you forcing something that's not naturally alchemically connecting, then what kind of mixture you really think you're gonna get? You know what I mean? Because the void is in the void, and the void, what's missing is not gonna, be less and less. It's just gonna grow. So you're gonna volunteer to go through this experience, or volunteer to go through experience where we're actually gonna go and be in alignment with the flow with someone.
I think that's very that is a very good breakdown, and I think because of how we approach these things or relationships and how they happen, and how a connection starts. Because at the end of the day, just like any other life form, you're looking for the basic elements to survive and connect. It's either surviving or connecting so you can thrive. Survive, connect, thrive, which in my mind creates the regeneration or the extension or the expansion of the species, and so on and so on. Now that may sound, easy for me to say, but there's so much that has gone into the work to understand that, from my understanding, and the creative way that I like to express it. And also, I want to add to hearing you share that, that void is something, because I know a lot of us will hide it with, you know, working overtime, you know, other recreational or entertainment outlets, and it would just get worse. And I think back, in general, some of my own evolution, some of the hard lessons learned, I've seen the kind of indoctrinated under that process, But I will say that now, being on the other side to a lot of things, I'm more grateful for this inner growth and understanding, and whatever elements of overstanding that are there, because I'm like, man, I have survived through it all and still am here, and still moving forward. But nonetheless, there's a deeper appreciation to being, as I'm coming to understand deeper and learning, being having my consciousness grow past 5 to 10% and becoming more right and left brain hemi-synced or hemisphere synced together. Being creatively logical, as full as I can, as my mind navigates through all of these parts and sections of my brain, and being able to quickly come to the fact or the conclusion or the action that's necessary for me to take in a particular situation or circumstance. And I guess, and also adding to that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read this other part of the paragraph and see your thoughts on this. It says, sharing good news to someone who doesn't react as you hoped is a depressing experience. Now, let me slow down and say that again. Sharing good news to someone who doesn't react as you hoped is a depressing experience. Imagine how a less satisfying reaction to your good news might shape your future behavior. The next time you have good news, would you even want to share it? This could create further distance, further jeopardizing the relationship. What do you think about that?
Mm. Yeah, I fully agree with that. You know, cause you know, cause you feel like your good news is their good news, your loved one's good news, your lover, and you and sharing that, yeah, they're gonna just get just excited as you or even more, and you guys are gonna talk about it and build on it. And when you present it and it's like a shutdown, it's like, somebody just slamming the door in your face. Like, so what? And those words aren't said, how, they're acted though. And you're like, well, what do you do with that? Where is this going? Because you're starting like to shift and to see that perhaps this person that you love and you're coming to this good news with is not on the same page as you all growing and thriving together. There's a message that's being sent to you that that person is not on the same page. And the good news, bad news, whatever kind of news, it's just not happening. So it's a blow or a wake up call or a red flag or a sign or a message, whichever you want to call it, or all of them, that something is no longer connecting the way you hoped or imagined or attempted, to envision. You know, it's just not going down because the balance is off. The energy is different. The intention is it's in different directions.
Well, you're right.
Mm.
And that it's a lot, or it can be a lot when the perception to what's happening is not honestly received or perceived appropriately for the right action or cause and effect action to what needs to be done, or even if I'm not going to say need, what should be done. And I think that's the challenge, that a lot of times we don't really know. We're getting into these situations a lot of times in my 2 3 cents, not with the right foundational base. And because of that, we go through all these encounters and experiences that do more harm than good through one perspective, but nonetheless will wake you up and will teach you to either see yourself closer and clearer, or what to look for closer and clear. It's always duality going on at a base level. I realize duality is very foundational in my understanding, in my spiritual evolution to creation. Everything at a base has its pair, and the pair can merge into one, true enough, but the pair based on what is being created um, is very instrumental, because it creates balance when you pair them together as they merge into one. So I look at merging into one as balance as well. But again, having a pair, especially on this planet, we see a lot of things operate in pairs and in groups, and it is very real. Now, they may have their unique experiences within that pair of that group, but nonetheless, even in connecting, I look at connecting as being a pair. Just wanting to connect is another is a you're looking for a opposite connection. Or let me define that. You're looking for a connection reflection that is
Mm-hmm.
opposite to your polarity, if you're more masculine or more feminine, because at the end of the day both of them are going to break down to that. No matter what people choose to do in their own personal life and their own rights and their choices, at the end of the day you're dealing with female and male energy. I have not seen it no other way.
I
Now I know
agree.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I agree.
And I was going to say, I know it gets interesting with certain, like a seahorse or something, or any other. I know there's some deep sea fish out there that they can kind of like do both. They can sort of like self impregnate. I'm gonna use that word as a common reference. I think I saw something on either Nat Geo some years ago or Discovery, and again they were giving good visual on it. And I can't remember what deep body of ocean, but there was these particular fish that could, they were sort of androgynous in a sense. And I was just like, wow, they were neither nor male nor female, but they impregnated themselves. And I believe the seahorse does that as well.
Mm. Wow.
And if I have to follow up and come back to it to be clear or to be exact, then I will, at a later episode. But just off the top of my head, I remember there's either fish, the seahorse, and it could be another species or two that's out there. It could be something in the amphibian kingdom, or that has that duality within their gender as well. So nature shows us exceptions to the rule, from what I come to understand. Just like you may have a hive of the queen bee and all the drone or worker bees, but there's one queen bee to a hive. There can only be one. So you see how certain species they they go with what's natural based on their survival to what they are programmed to do, and only under environmental or ecological changes do they, or what we say in general, climate changes, will they do things differently. But that's the evolution of that particular species or organism,
Mm.
or vice versa.
Right.
So, in saying that there's exceptions to the rule, I'm like, that's where it gets interesting, because things follow within a certain species a certain rule. But nature, as I come to understand, has various rules for specific species and organisms. Nonetheless, they all are interconnected. They all play a role with, microorganisms and single cell organisms in these things. But nonetheless, they all are interconnected because they're all sharing the same space and place in time on this particular planet that we call Earth, or the other various indigenous names that it is known by.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I guess in going back to the exceptions to the rule, what I'm also trying to say is knowing when an exception to the rule applies within the human species and when it doesn't. Because nature can show, well, it can work in this environment, but that doesn't mean it's going to work in your species or your particular multi-cell organism environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is being very clear with that, because again, we can see something sometimes that's different and say, "Oh, well, it exists and I want to try it. It exists, so it should work over here as well." And then you go attempting to discuss that or even demonstrate, and it's like, "Nah, my friend, it's not happening, it's not working. That's not the flow of the connection that I want to experience, and vice versa." What do you think about
Right.
that?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm in the flow with what you're saying. Yes.
And in saying that, these things again, I'm recognizing require deeper study and deeper inner reflection, because again, what's true to someone else is not fully true to whoever else. Truth is always relative to how you see facts upon whatever the form or the venue or the circumstance, situation, relationship, or dynamic in which you're interfacing in what we call third dimension, or the material aspect of life or life on earth that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And then recognizing that you are a energy field at a particular rate and density. I mean, I know I'm going kind of in another direction from the article, but nonetheless it's connected, because things are way deeper than they're being perceived or even presented.
Yes.
And in going to the next key point from the article, it says random than just verbal clues. Non-verbal clues are especially noticeable signs of a deteriorating relationship. I'll read it again. Rather than just verbal clues, non-verbal clues are especially noticeable signs of a deteriorating relationship. What do you think about that?
I agree. It's true.
Can you elaborate?
Well, you're not motivated and to share the same kind of the same to interact the same way physically. You're not kissing as much, you're not talking as much, you're not as playful, you're not joking, you know what I'm saying? You're not even wanting to eat together or share what you got, or different things of that nature, or you know let them know, like, I saw your favorite dessert, I saw that dessert or that meal that you liked, or whatever. You're not yeah, you're not doing things, you're not saying things the way you used to say them. You could be doing the same things, and you're doing it a different way because you're sending off a different kind of energy that's sending that nonverbal message. Yeah, this is about to end.
Mm.
You know, and it doesn't matter what you say, do, or think. It's done. It's just a matter of how long both of us are going to hold on and not just embrace what is and always has been.
Well, you're right. And yeah, it's a process. It's something, just being able to see that. And as I look at the article and more of its breakdown around that particular key point, it says fewer positive nonverbal behaviors. If you've ever thought that how you say something can reveal what you say, you've tapped into some keen relationship insights. An analysis of the predictive power of nonverbal and verbal behaviors showed that positive nonverbal behaviors, smiles, leaning in, encouragement, predict higher relationship satisfaction later on. To what extent does your partner provide nonverbal support to you? Do you do the same? If not, it could be a sign of a weakening relationship. Wow. And again, all these things, they happen so automatic and natural, but a lot of us are moving so fast from what it seems, or what many will say, and they're like, I don't really know which way is up half the time, let alone, you know, to sit and pause and reflect for a minute on a nonverbal behavior that's positive versus a nonverbal behavior that's negative. But nonetheless, it's happening. Whether we are fully aware of it or not, we're all sending those messages. And again, this is part of the top 6 signs based on this particular article and how this psychologist defines in the Western realm or within human behavior in third dimension or within planet Earth, the top 6 signs of a deteriorating relationship. And we all know this seems very common. We've all kind of seen this, experienced it. We all have done it many, many times. And I'm not even sure, like you said, unless you're studying this on a deeper level, a lot of us do this so automatic, we don't even understand what we're saying and what we're doing, in my humble 2-3 cents, and what is really going on. Like we're literally walking off an edge of a cliff thinking that we have our eyes wide open, but it seems to be that we're blindfolded and totally void of any full awareness while going through these things and literally jumping off the cliff with or without someone attached to you. And that's metaphorically, speaking, or even from a creative, you know, hypothetical or theoretical, but nonetheless it's happening
Mm-hmm.
every day, every second, as we, exchange this dialogue. It's happening right now. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Um, it's somewhat, like not. Yeah. I was about to say that. Because it's like, if you decide, I think it's somewhat like if you decide like you want to parachute out of an airplane, you're not going to go through all that and then get ready when it's time for you to parachute, and then you don't have no parachute. What's going to happen? You know what I mean? So you got to have your parachute. And if that other person, I guess, if both of you don't have a parachute, or am I explaining it correctly? Let's see.
No, I think that's a good way you're going. I think you're giving a good example, because the parachute example is great, because that's part of the preparation and the safety mechanism on being on an airplane or a jet or something that's in the air. There's always a backup system, whether it's a parachute or some sort of safety mechanism. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be some sort of parachute that ejects at some point when you eject out of whatever you're in. Now, it might be quite interesting with an airplane. With airplanes, I guess you're going down with the plane.
Mm,
But you see, based on the type of aircraft it is, a parachute is not even it's not even a second thought.
mm-hmm.
But why is there not a second thought about an airplane having parachutes? And so imagine that. I guess basically they're guaranteeing to either land it safely in the water, or basically if you're going down with it.
Yeah.
So think about it. They're saying we can't guarantee you a safe landing every time, because at that altitude they're looking at it 9 times out of 10. How are you going to organize? How are you in an organized way are going to jump out of a plane that's nosediving?
Mm,
There's like no way, from my understanding. I mean, you got to really be some sort of you know specialist on that level to jump out of a nosediving airplane at, I don't know, 30, 40, 50,000 feet in the air or something. If my numbers are
yeah.
calculated correct.
I think that's about right, or higher. Yeah. Or yeah, around that. Yeah.
So if we go back to what you're saying about a parachute, let's just say, and that not being on, let's just say there was supposed to be a parachute for everybody on board this particular aircraft experience or this particular plane, and there's not, then what happens from there? Can you share your parachute?
Hmm. Do you want to share
Or,
your parachute?
huh?
I said, do you want to share your parachute? That's the question. Yeah.
Well, think about if you care about the person and you say you love them enough, but they can't get their parachute on in time, or there's just not enough to go around. Would you
Mm.
take that risk and allow them
Yeah.
to? Huh?
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Right. You said you would take that risk if you felt like you loved and cared for that person enough, even at the risk of losing your own life. You would share a parachute.
Um. See, I'm not sure. So it's well. Then the question goes, why do we have to lose our lives to do this? Why can't we thrive? Why does that have to be a factor? Because if we're both coming prepared and we're in alignment with one another, we're both going to have a parachute.
Well, you're right. Well, you're right.
So,
And but that's the creative question is when we're not, because we're looking at it from both sides. But of course, when we are there, it's not even a second thought.
yeah. And there's a difference.
Well, there's a major difference, as you know. But again, how many of us are being honest that we're working towards that?
Yeah.
We say we want it. We say we want to experience it. We say it has to change. It has to be something different. But are we genuinely, authentically doing the work second by second within each, as I like to say, day of the sun or plasma of the sun, and vice versa?
Well, yeah, there lies the responsibility, embracing that. Are we going to embrace the responsibility of the journey that this intensely involves? And
Well,
there's
I
no
definitely.
halfway doing it. There's no halfway. You got to go all the way. Well, it's not going to work.
Oh, I agree. I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're right. You have to be all in. Like, and I realize that the older in my awareness I get, this process of I like to call it spiritual holistic living evolution. Another term I use based on who I'm speaking with. I may share it or not, or I may paraphrase it and just edit it to the basis. But this process requires, I mean, you have to be. There's no other way. At a certain level of your awareness, you got to be all in.
Hmm.
And I think that will set the connection in a very unique and more special place in what's possible in conjunction to what is more hypothetical.
Hmm.
And in saying that, I'm saying there's a reality and then there's still the possibility in our mind. Because, you can perceive it a certain way, but that doesn't mean that person is honoring that to the degree in which you are.
Right.
And in almost, we have about 12 minutes left, I noticed, into getting close to bringing this episode one to an end. What I would like to share with you real quick, see if we can get one more key point here. I'm gonna jump to this one, this key point breakdown, which talks about deteriorating illusions. How awesome is your partner? Relationships may persist in part because people hold slightly unrealistic ideas about their partners. They see them as better than they really are, especially on abstract traits or characteristics that are particularly important to them. Meta analysis suggests that positive illusions are key predictors of relationship stability, and lack thereof may be a sign that a relationship is critically suffering. It says signs that someone is unhappy in a relationship and that their commitment is waning may come in many forms. The above list includes behaviors that might be hard to notice in the moment, but upon consideration or in hindsight might seem more obvious. This may be one of the hard aspects of relationship breakups, particularly when they are very one sided. One person may be thinking their detachment is obvious, the other might not realize the extent of their mental separation. If you're familiar with Exile, it mentions this particular book. It says the point is clear. I guess it's a song. Yeah, it's a song here. It says Exile by somebody named Taylor Swift and Bon Iver. It says the point is made clear. He says you never gave a warning sign, and she says I gave so many signs. It could be that he just didn't want to see them.
Mm, yeah, very true.
Well, we're down to under the 10-minute mark. Is there anything else you would like to add around the six signs of a deteriorating relationship and any of the points that we referenced, as well as any of the comparisons, the pros and cons in which we have shared on?
Um, well, yeah. Um, your environment is vital to your evolvement. Um, your environment must support your healing and your evolvement. And if it doesn't do that, then evolving is going to be, huh, it's not going to be at its full capacity.
Well, I agree with that, and I'm gonna ask you this. Well, I guess what I'll do is I'll read this other few sentences that talk about lack of self-disclosure. I wanted to definitely touch on that as well. And it says, how often do you share your feelings with your partner? Do you share their feelings with you? The exchange of intimate feelings, a process called emotional self-disclosure, can support relationship health. One person speaks and the other listens intently, offers validation, and shows they care. The responsiveness of the listener is critical to self-disclosure, building relationship health. When people no longer share their important feelings with a partner or share them with someone else instead, the partner loses a chance to build their relationship. Look at that. When this becomes a habit, now look at that. It could suggest someone is oriented away from a relationship. Any thoughts?
Um, whew, yeah. Um, say that. Say that last part again.
When people no longer share their important feelings with a partner or share them with someone else instead, the partner loses a chance to build their relationship. When this becomes a habit, it could suggest someone is oriented away from a relationship.
Yeah, because when you start feeling that who you're with is basically not that into you anymore, you know, I guess you start wondering, well, if you're not going to be into me, who will? You know what I mean? And then when you start feeling comfortable enough to express certain things you really should be talking to your partner about with someone else, well, that creates an oh, an unwanted really variable. You know what I mean? Where as now you're bringing someone else into the picture instead of just dealing with what is and has been. You know, your lack of communication about how you feel about what's happening isn't helping decide whether or not you should stay or leave, or to give you more guidance on how to move, because you're not giving information and sharing information within the core environment that you need to be. You are taking away support from the environment that you should be supporting.
Well, I'm gonna say that is true, and I think in processing this article and some things I've learned over the years, you know, usually how we share and who we share with, I realize is very critical based on how your household is set up and how the level of commitment in which you're in and where you are.
Hmm.
And I think that that is very, very intense. And I think when that is not understood, you know, things go left more often than not. But remember, if it's gradually deteriorating and unraveling, it's like, well, the signs were there. It's just this person may have decided, well, I gave you three options, or four or five or 10, and I'm done, as in,
Hmm.
chances.
Right.
And in saying that, I think, this becomes a challenge of knowing, when are they just seeking, genuine help, or when are they really trying to find an escape to either cope or coexist in both situations, or even a third simultaneous, and all of the other trauma dramas that can create, because they're not being 100% honest and why they're seeking these other situations, let alone what they're sharing back with the person that they're with. Now, I'm definitely speaking on when you're under one roof, not when you're still filling each other out, and you're still working on building, if you're going to fully make that leap into this situation. But I'm saying when you're really more committed to it and you're under one roof, because in my opinion, if you're not under one roof, there's still, unless you're very clear with your words and vice versa, it's still not really official. But I know there's some people who say, well, we just do better living separate. Maybe it does. Like they say, everything is not for everyone. But I will say the communication is for everyone, because without that being clear, that can even be misinterpreted.
Hmm.
But some people feel like, well, I can keep, a backup spot or a place. And I think, while you're in transition, maybe that's okay, from a certain perspective. But I do think, you know, we all usually want to be under one roof, but there's those of us who are exceptions to the rules out here, who feel like, no, we can coexist while living separate. And I guess it works for those. Like they say, not everything is for everyone. In my way of sharing that. Any comments you would like to say in closing, as we're down to the last minute and 30 seconds?
Yes, I agree with you. And I'll say again, and like I guess 1,000 times, your environment is vital. It's vital in the support of the direction. It's vital for the support of direction that you're going in. That's a very powerful tool, vital tool. Yeah.
Well, I agree. And as we close this out now with a minute left and counting, or under a minute, the environment will be, we will expand on that in episode 2 with Precious Jewels. The question is, are you evolving or devolving? And we will definitely explore the environment in not just being single, but definitely in a relationship, or in what we define would be a healthy or evolving relationship, and how important that tone is for both parties, especially when you bring it under one roof. We will definitely touch on that. And now, with the last 42 seconds and counting, I would like to say, In La Shalakin, Namaste, as we say, Hotep, as we say, all is love, all is light, all is expansion. Good night.